President Donald Trump convened a high-level cabinet meeting at the White House just hours after announcing what he called a historic breakthrough, a comprehensive peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. The deal, which came after months of secret diplomacy and international mediation, marks one of the most significant diplomatic achievements in recent Middle Eastern history. According to senior administration officials, the agreement establishes a framework for a long-term ceasefire, economic cooperation, and reconstruction efforts in Gaza. Trump hailed the accord as a monumental step toward lasting peace in the Middle East, emphasizing that it was achieved through what he described as unprecedented American leadership and strong negotiation tactics. The president, speaking before reporters at the start of the meeting, framed the event as a validation of his administration's foreign policy approach, which, he claimed, combines strength with a deep commitment to peace. Inside the cabinet room, the mood was described as both triumphant and cautious. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo briefed the team on the key elements of the agreement, including provisions for mutual security guarantees, a roadmap for Gaza's reconstruction, and the gradual normalization of relations between Israel and several Arab nations that had been previously reluctant to engage in dialogue. Defense Secretary Mark Esper outlined the Pentagon's role in ensuring that ceasefire commitments are upheld, noting that U.S. military intelligence assets will monitor compliance through satellite and on-the-ground verification. Trump, often animated during such meetings, directed special praise toward his son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner, who reportedly played a crucial behind-the-scenes role in mediating between the Israeli government and Hamas leadership in Doha and Cairo. "This is something people said was impossible," Trump remarked, adding that, for decades, politicians just talked, "We got it done." The peace deal itself includes several groundbreaking provisions designed to address the long-standing humanitarian and political crises that have defined the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Among them is a joint economic corridor that will open trade between Gaza and Israel under international supervision, creating thousands of jobs and facilitating the movement of goods and people for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Humanitarian aid, infrastructure development, and energy cooperation are at the forefront of the agreement, with countries such as Egypt, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates pledging billions in funding to rebuild Gaza's decimated infrastructure. In exchange, Hamas has reportedly agreed to a permanent cessation of rocket attacks and the dismantling of certain military capabilities under UN monitoring. For Israel, the deal represents not only enhanced security but also a significant diplomatic victory, one that could reshape regional alliances and potentially pave the way for renewed dialogue with the Palestinian Authority, which has so far remained cautious in its response. Critics, however, warn that the agreement, while promising on paper, faces formidable challenges on the ground. Skeptics point to past ceasefire collapses and question whether Hamas's leadership can maintain unified control over all militant factions operating in Gaza. International observers have also noted that while the deal carries Trump's signature diplomatic style, bold, transactional, and media-driven, its long-term success will depend on sustained engagement by future administrations. Nevertheless, Trump's allies argue that the move could cement his legacy as a peacemaker on par with the Camp David Accords or the Abraham Accords. As the cabinet meeting concluded, the president reiterated his commitment to overseeing the implementation phase personally, saying, "This isn't just another peace deal, it's the dawn of a new era for the Middle East." With the global community watching closely, the coming weeks will determine whether this latest Trump-brokered accord can truly deliver the stability and coexistence that generations have sought but never fully achieved. Following the cabinet meeting, President Trump moved swiftly to translate diplomatic promises into action, tasking various departments with immediate follow-up responsibilities. The State Department was directed to coordinate with regional partners to establish a joint monitoring mission composed of American, Egyptian, and Qatari officials. This mission will oversee compliance with the ceasefire terms and supervise the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. The Treasury Department, meanwhile, was ordered to develop a framework for releasing frozen assets to support reconstruction projects, while also ensuring that funds are not diverted to militant activities. Trump emphasized the importance of transparency and accountability, warning that every dollar must go to rebuilding lives, not funding terror. He further instructed his economic advisors to engage with U.S. businesses and investors to explore opportunities in infrastructure, energy, and technology sectors that could contribute to long-term regional stability. Within hours, the White House announced that a multinational reconstruction fund would be launched, with the United States pledging an initial $2 billion in humanitarian and economic assistance, one of the largest commitments to Gaza in recent history. Diplomatic reactions poured in from around the world, underscoring the magnitude of the breakthrough. European Union leaders praised the deal as a ray of hope in a region long defined by conflict and despair, while the United Nations Secretary-General called it a milestone for peace. In the Arab world, reactions were mixed but largely positive. Egypt, which played a crucial role as a mediator, celebrated the agreement as a victory for diplomacy. Qatar, which has historically supported Hamas, hailed the accord as a turning point that balances humanitarian priorities with political pragmatism. However, Iran sharply criticized the deal, accusing the United States and Israel of orchestrating it for geopolitical gain rather than genuine peace. Palestinian Authority officials, sidelined from the negotiations, expressed skepticism, stating that any sustainable peace must include broader political recognition of Palestinian statehood. Nonetheless, thousands of civilians in both Israel and Gaza were seen celebrating cautiously in the streets, Israeli families relieved at the prospect of safety, and Gazans hopeful for the end of years of isolation and economic hardship. Inside the United States, the political reverberations were immediate. Supporters of President Trump heralded the peace deal as the ultimate vindication of his America First foreign policy, arguing that it demonstrated how assertive diplomacy could achieve what decades of conventional negotiation could not. Conservative commentators drew comparisons between Trump's achievements and those of historical figures like Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, portraying him as a disruptor who reshaped the geopolitical landscape. On the other hand, critics, particularly among Democrats and foreign policy analysts, accused the administration of oversimplifying a deeply complex issue. They warned that the lack of involvement from the Palestinian Authority could undermine the legitimacy of the agreement in the long run. Some members of Congress called for full transparency regarding the terms of the deal and how the U.S. funds would be allocated, emphasizing the need for oversight to prevent misuse. Still, even among skeptics, there was a reluctant acknowledgement that the cessation of violence, however fragile, represented a rare and welcome respite in one of the world's most volatile regions. As the day ended, the White House communications team rolled out a comprehensive media campaign to highlight what it described as the most significant foreign policy triumph of Trump's presidency. A prime-time address was scheduled, in which the president was expected to outline the broader implications of the peace deal, not just for Israel and Hamas, but for the entire Middle East. Senior aides hinted that this could be the foundation for future normalization agreements between Israel and other Muslim-majority nations. Analysts noted that if the accord holds, it could transform Trump's legacy from that of a divisive political figure to that of a statesman who redefined diplomacy through unconventional means. With implementation teams set to deploy to the region within days, and an international summit planned in Abu Dhabi to finalize economic frameworks, the world watches with cautious optimism. The coming months will test whether Trump's bold gamble on direct negotiation and power diplomacy can endure the harsh realities of Middle Eastern politics, or fade like so many promises of peace before it. In the weeks following the signing of the Israel-Hamas peace deal, the Trump administration intensified its diplomatic and logistical efforts to ensure the agreement's success. The White House established a specialized task force, headed by Jared Kushner and National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, to coordinate all aspects of implementation, from humanitarian aid to security coordination. U.S. officials were dispatched to Tel Aviv, Doha, and Cairo to maintain open lines of communication between all parties and to address any potential violations of the ceasefire. For the first time in years, border crossings between Israel and Gaza opened to allow limited movement of goods and medical supplies under heavy international monitoring. Satellite imagery from U.S. intelligence confirmed a visible reduction in military activity on both sides, suggesting that the ceasefire was largely holding. Trump, in a statement from the Oval Office, declared, "This is what peace looks like: calm skies, open trade routes, and hope returning to the people who have suffered too long." He also hinted at a possible presidential visit to the region, saying he wanted to stand on the soil where peace has finally begun. Meanwhile, the economic dimension of the peace deal began to take shape with remarkable speed. International donors convened in Abu Dhabi to finalize the establishment of the Gaza Reconstruction and Prosperity Fund, a multi-billion-dollar initiative backed by the US, European Union, and Gulf states. Construction equipment, engineers, and aid workers began entering Gaza under international escort to rebuild key infrastructure such as hospitals, schools, and power grids. American companies, particularly in the fields of technology, renewable energy, and construction, were invited to participate in new investment opportunities. The Trump administration touted these projects as evidence that peace could bring tangible prosperity, not just political rhetoric. Simultaneously, Israel agreed to relax several long-standing trade restrictions, allowing Palestinian farmers and merchants to export goods to neighboring countries. These developments created an atmosphere of cautious optimism, as images of Gazan children returning to school and local markets reopening began circulating across global media, symbols of a fragile but real hope taking root after years of despair. However, behind the optimism, challenges quickly emerged that tested the resilience of the agreement. Reports surfaced of isolated clashes between Hamas splinter groups and Israeli forces near the Gaza border, prompting fears that radical elements opposed to peace might try to derail the process. The Trump administration responded by increasing diplomatic pressure on both sides to exercise restraint. U.S. intelligence officials confirmed that Iranian-backed factions were attempting to undermine the truce through propaganda and arms smuggling. To counter these efforts, Trump authorized expanded intelligence sharing between the CIA, Mossad, and Egyptian intelligence agencies. "We're not going to let the enemies of peace win," Trump said during a press briefing. At the same time, humanitarian organizations urged all parties to prioritize civilian welfare, warning that any disruption could reverse the progress made so far. On Capitol Hill, debates intensified over the cost and scope of U.S. involvement, with some lawmakers demanding that aid be tied to measurable reforms in governance and human rights within Gaza. As the agreement entered its crucial second phase, plans were unveiled for a broader regional peace summit, to be hosted in Washington, D.C., bringing together leaders from Israel, Egypt, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. The summit's goal would be to expand the framework of the Israel-Hamas deal into a comprehensive Middle East peace initiative, encompassing security, trade, and cross-border cooperation. President Trump, clearly energized by what he viewed as his crowning diplomatic achievement, positioned himself as the central figure in this unfolding narrative. "We are witnessing the birth of a new Middle East," he proclaimed, hinting that additional Arab nations were already in talks to join future normalization efforts. Political analysts suggested that Trump's timing was strategic, a move aimed not only at securing global peace but also at reinforcing his political capital ahead of the next election cycle. Whether driven by legacy or diplomacy, the result was undeniable. After decades of violence, the region had entered a new chapter where dialogue, not warfare, was beginning to define the headlines. The world, once skeptical, now watched with a mix of disbelief and admiration as the Trump peace deal began to reshape the very foundations of Middle Eastern politics.